Oh, we are back. Flint's News Talk, 1470 WFNT. So we're talking about this Texas case, which is blown up big after this decision. Jury trial, and the mother was awarded custody. There's stuff that goes on. This kind of thing happens to people all over. And I think we're talking with Stacy Swimp joining us. Thank you, sir. It's good to have you here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We're gonna talk with him and let him share his story. This happens everywhere. And we were talking before we came on about the fact that these family court issues, these issues where you've got parents who are divorced or not married and who have children and have differences over what to do with the children, and they tend to side with the mother. And as you were saying, it's not always the case that the mother is the one who should be sided with, and yet it's hard to get a fair shake for fathers sometimes. And that's what you feel is going on here in this particular situation with you and your kid. Why don't you tell people what you're dealing with?
That's going on to the extreme. And again, thank you for having me on your show. In my situation, it goes beyond, in my opinion, in my experience, it goes beyond simple court bias against the dad. In my honest opinion, we're talking about potentially criminal decisions by judges who are under the color of law in their official capacity are violating my due process rights. Go back to 2017. To your listening audience, my son started testing positive for cocaine and marijuana exposure in August of 2017.
How old was your son?
He's 3 now. At the time, he was barely over 1 year old.
Okay.
He kept coming to me smelling like marijuana. I had a friend of mine who worked for the state at the time introduced me to something called a hair follicle environmental exposure test.
Okay.
Now, what that is a child guard test, because children that young, obviously, they can't voluntarily get high, right?
Right.
So there are scientific ways of finding out if these children are exposed environmentally
right.
to cocaine, marijuana, meth, or whatever it may be.
Yes.
So I was blessed, and I found out about a company called About My Health. And they have a collection site here in Troy, Michigan. They themselves are based out of Illinois.
Okay.
Took my son down there. Long story short, he came back positive for cocaine and marijuana.
Okay.
We filed a motion for emergency custody. I voluntarily took the same hair follicle environmental exposure test, paid hundreds of dollars. This is very expensive.
Yeah.
And my test came back negative. Which meant not only do I not use, but it proved that I wasn't even involved or around.
The exposure wasn't coming from you.
It wasn't coming from. It couldn't be.
Yeah.
Well, Judge F.K. Beam, who was our family court judge at the time, decided that my son testing positive for cocaine and marijuana was not an urgent matter.
Okay.
She said that's no cause for emergency. And she said that doesn't mean that exposure alone doesn't mean he's in imminent harm or danger. Call CPS. CPS opened a case. But ultimately, and this is not going to shock you because we talked about the bias against dads. In spite of the fact that when CPS opened the case, mom tested positive for marijuana. Mom had a part-time living boyfriend on parole for cocaine distribution. And yet CPS, the family court.
So he's living in, she got a boyfriend.
That's part-time living there, yeah.
Part-time living there.
Yeah.
Who spent time in jail for distributing cocaine.
That's correct.
That's one of the environmental sources that you discovered in this test that you paid for your child.
Correct.
CPS goes and checks out the home, finds these two people, and discovers this. So what happens next?
CPS then retaliates against me because when they didn't do anything for about 30 days or so, I started, as you see, I advocate now. I started doing then. I started going to the state legislature. I started asking people in city council, do something. Could you please do something?
Who'd you talk to? Who's your councilman?
So at the time, it was Scott Kincaid.
Okay.
But at the time, nobody locally did anything. So Shane Hernandez, Representative Shane Hernandez from Port Huron, he then wrote a letter to the DHS Director Nick Lyons at the time.
Before you got there, let me ask you, I just want to back up for a quick minute. So about 30 days. How long did you wait for CPS to get this right? How long was it before, in between? I mean, did you have contact with them, and what were they saying? What were they telling you with respect to their inaction?
No, good question. So CPS, my son tested positive for cocaine and marijuana at the end of August. CPS opened up their case at the end of August of 2017. I had a little contact with CPS worker Kelsey Cross between the end of end of August and then toward the first week of October 2017. Few texts, few phone calls. She was pretty much dismissive, telling me, let me do my job. I don't need anybody telling me how to do my job. She had no sense of urgency, which frustrated me as a father.
Had she been to see them? Did you even know that?
She wouldn't tell me anything. But you know what? She did say, though, that she asked my son's mother to allow my son to stay with me throughout the course of the CPS investigation, and my son's mother said no, which is why it shocked me that CPS turned around in the middle of October of 2017 and filed a petition to remove my son from me and text my phone.
What's that?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
So you've got CPS. They've opened a case.
Yes.
Against the mother based on the information that
Initially,
you provided them.
Correct. Yes.
And then at what point, say this again, at what point do they file a motion to take the child from you to deny you custody?
So at the same time CPS was doing their investigation, I had also filed a police complaint against my son's mother with the Flint Police Department.
Okay.
Detective Mary Buzek, well, she's no longer a detective now; she's a PD officer. But at the time, she was in charge of child abuse and neglect.
Okay, for the Flint Police Department.
Correct. And for 30 days, or just about 30 days, Detective Mary Buzek never even placed a call to me to respond to the police
to the complaint.
Never even made a call.
30 days.
30 days. So I then go to the police department
after 30 days.
Yes, and demand to speak to someone.
What's going on?
What's going on? I'm his dad. I got a right to know. So they say, well, Reverend Swimp, Mary Buzek is in charge of this case. She'll call you tomorrow. Well, that tomorrow came, and she called me. And folks, let me tell you, I have never had anybody in law enforcement in my life talk to me in such a demeaning, dehumanizing, and disrespectful fashion as what Mary Buzek did that day. She was loud. She was crass. She told me she wanted me to take a lie detector test. I asked her why. For what? She told me I basically was a suspect. I'm like, how? I don't.
Suspect in what?
That's what I said. For what? For what? I said, ma'am, I don't do drugs. I've shown you I don't do drugs. She got mad and hung up on me. Right? I talked to my attorney, Patrick Chatterton. He said, look, just go ahead and take the polygraph test. You don't have anything to hide. And by the way, folks, that was the worst advice Mr. Chatterton could have ever given me. If your attorney tells you that, get you another attorney.
Why is that?
Because at the end of the day, one thing is lie detector tests are inadmissible.
Yeah.
They're not admissible in court. It's useless. And what I found out was that I guess they take them because they think maybe you'll say something to incriminate yourself during the interview process. Yeah. But in my case, I had nothing to hide. So, right. I mean, I never said anything to incriminate myself. But it's just a bad idea.
But you did take the test.
Yeah, I took the test. And then Buzak, by the way, at the state post on Corona Road, I took the test. They claimed I failed it. That's interesting. I told the guy, I said, I failed it, huh? I said, I don't believe you. I don't do drugs. He said, okay, well, you're free to go. As I went out to the lobby, well, I had 2 police officers waiting on me to arrest me for child endangerment for allegedly failing a lie detector test. And lo and behold, Buzak comes from behind wherever she was, and she's cussing and she's screaming, telling me to shut the F up, mother effer, you talk to mother effer. I've never seen a cop behave like this. Take me downtown, cuff me up, take my stuff out of my pocket. I'm down there, I guess, 45 minutes or so before they take the cuffs off me. Buzak then interviews me for another hour and a half, I'm not sure how long it was, screaming, hollering, yelling at me, just very disrespectful. Well, you know what? I filed a lawsuit against Buzak for that in June of 2018. And
what was the reason for doing this? I mean, in your sense, why is this officer taking such a special interest in this? What is so? You're obviously you're alleging this is just this is wrongful prosecution.
Absolutely.
This is
malicious
prosecution.
Absolutely.
What's the reason for it? What in your opinion? What accounts for this? Just because you're putting pressure on them to do their job?
I think Buzak was retaliating against me.
For what though?
For coming down there and complaining and issuing and challenging her lack of doing her job. And by the way, toward the end of October, I finally had a chance to talk to Chief Johnson and it was another police officer, one of her superiors. I can't remember the name right. I did talk to Chief Johnson, and Internal Affairs then opened up an investigation against Mary Buzak.
Okay.
And then I believe it was Detective Will Surface, who is now retired, but Detective Will Surface was in charge of internal affairs at that time.
Okay.
He then called me toward the end of 2017, indicated that they were going to do an investigation into my complaint. Well, somewhere around February or March of 2018, Detective Will Surface reached out to me via email and said, Mr. Swimp, this is just to indicate to you that Internal Affairs has completed their investigation and Detective Mary Buzek has been sanctioned. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I then went down and communicated with Chief Johnson and asked him for clarity of perspective. What does that mean?
Yes.
And he said that means that I fired her from her job as a detective.
So she was fired. She was busted down from detective.
She was busted down from detective, put back out on the beat. He said she had time off from work and she lost her take-home car. So this was in direct response
to your complaint.
Absolutely.
And their investigation
Yes.
of it, and in response to that.
Yes, and then I filed a lawsuit a couple of months after that against Mary Buzek and the city of Flint, which is that lawsuit is still on the books.
Okay, that's pending.
Yes.
So in the meantime, you're dealing with this. This is, you've got to think, how did I get here? What is going on? This is
my
crazy.
goodness. It is.
And then in the meantime, what's going on at Protective Services?
So, oh, you're gonna love this. So, Protective Services, I told you they filed this emergency petition to remove my son from me. Come to find out that the CPS worker Kelsey Cross and Buzek were colluding together, and much of what the CPS worker was doing, she was relying upon what Buzek was telling her. This all came out more and more in the depositions of my federal lawsuit. When we deposed Buzek and we also deposed Kelsey Cross, you should have heard those two. They were deposed at different times, but they were kind of throwing each other under the bus.
They're
kind of
both,
thing.
yeah.
Right.
Well, to me, it was her.
Right. So Buzek, and I'm saying this not out of revenge, spite, or hate, but I'm telling you, it's
That's what happened.
It happened. Buzek is a malicious liar. Okay.
And you think that this is all a result of you putting pressure on her to do her job and nothing more?
I mean, listen. I'm a preacher, right? So the Bible tells us who can know the heart. Who can go into the motives of someone's heart and say all the reasons why somebody does something? I couldn't answer that question with fact. I can only tell you that A, Buzek is unethical. B, she was spiteful. 3, I think she did it out of retaliation. Why do I think that? Because when she took me in her office, you remember I told you I was arrested? I was taken downtown and she took me in this office. Well, the first thing that she said to me, the very first thing she said to me was, you don't have a right to come down here and tell me how to do my job, mother effer. Yeah. Hence my conclusion.
Sure. Well, that's what I wanted. No, this is what I wanted. I wanted to know what leads you to that conclusion.
She said out of her own mouth. You don't have a right to come down here and tell me how to do my job, mother effer.
So she's angry about this. Yeah. Okay.
Buzz wanted me. She wanted me.
And then she starts to feed that information. So you've got two agencies. You've got two agencies who are involved in this. Two local agencies.
Yes.
And the detective who's not happy about being put on the spot. You've got no right to question me.
And the CPS worker who also felt the same because you had state legislators writing
her
CPS.
Because you're like, come on,
right?
Let's get this taken care of.
Correct.
And I've got to tell you, and I hate to say this, they're probably used to dealing with people who don't object,
right?
Who don't care, who aren't involved enough to get to say, I need answers, to demand answers, and they're used to dealing with sheep.
You know, it's interesting. For a period of time, I had an attorney in the CPS case. Her name is Jody Hemingway, and the day I went to retain her, I'm going to meet with her. The first thing she said to me was, "This is some racist bullcrap." She was alluding to systemic issues that she felt were present, but I think that's a part of it. But I really believe that a lot of it is the bias against dads.
Yeah,
and then also,
and the feeling of how dare you? You don't question
I'm
me.
I'm the CPS person. I make these decisions. I'm the government official, and I'll get to you when I get to you.
Mary Buzek,
they forget who they work for.
Is she white?
I don't know. She's lighter hue. I was told recently that she's African American, so I didn't know.
What about CPS?
CPS worker Kelsey Cross is a Caucasian lady.
Okay.
But here, you're gonna love this, guys. I'm gonna say this quickly, because I've done a lot of research and I've been through this a lot since then. So initially, when the family court referee Ariano Heath initially, they had nothing on me, and they still don't have anything on me. She then approved a petition. You're going to love this, folks. She approved a petition to remove my son from me the first time based upon Kelsey Cross telling her that my son's mother and I got into an argument at the OBGYN office when she was 4 months pregnant. That was the basis for removing my son the first time, because that proved, of course, domestic violence, they claim, And then 30 days later, CPS put in an amendment to terminate my parental rights based upon drug exposure or drug ingestion. It was quite a jump, and it was violation of due process. But CPS worker Kelsey Cross said that she did that because Buzzek told her that I was going to be charged with child endangerment. Buzzek told her that she had put in a warrant for my arrest to the prosecutor's office. But folks, guess what? When I filed a lawsuit against Barry Buzzek, my attorney subpoenaed the prosecutor's office in Flint, Michigan, and asked for that warrant request. The prosecutor sent a letter to us saying Barry Buzzek never, ever requested a warrant for Mr. Swimp's arrest. That didn't happen.
Despite what she told, allegedly told us.
What does that mean? That means that I lost custody of my son for almost 11 months. For 11 months.
Oh. Hang on.
For a lie.
Hang on. We're gonna be back. We gotta stay right here. We're talking with Stacy Swimp. Unbelievable case here locally. You wonder how this stuff happens.
That's how it happens.
You wonder how this happens in Texas. This is how it happens.
Same kind of stuff.
Same exact sort of stuff. We're gonna be right back. Flint's News Talk 1470 WFNT. All right, we are back. We're here with Stacy Swimp. This is amazing. This is pathetic. What's happening here? So,
just real quick, I'm glad we cleared up that it was your unborn child who told them that you got into an argument at the OBGYN clinic.
No, so on the paperwork, Kelsey Cross claimed that she talked to some people at the OBGYN office who said that there was some tension between the mom and dad and
tension.
I don't know.
What was the tension over?
Well, my son's mother had tested positive for STD while she was pregnant. Stunned me. We weren't in relations, at the time. She was pregnant. I was doing the right thing as a dad, but we weren't involved. And so I was stunned, disappointed, and frustrated and upset, of course, when I was in that OBGYN office and I heard him say to her, "Ma'am, you have an STD." So, we definitely had some tension there.
But you didn't strike her. There was no physical contact.
There was no physical. There was no argument. There was no argument. It was just tension.
And that ground didn't stand. That didn't end up being the thing that they used to try and terminate your parental right. They did terminate for 11 months. Your child you were denied the ability to spend time with your son in your home, supervised visits only.
Oh, they had me going
based
to
on
DHS for 11 months. 11 months.
Based on what?
Based upon an allegation of Kelsey Cross.
Which was?
That I ingested my son with cocaine and marijuana. And mind you, she switched it up because the original petition was exposure, right? Kelsey Cross changed the language and said ingested.
So they're accusing you of introducing these elements to your son in order to accuse your wife. That's the basis of.
Well, we were never married. My son's mother, correct?
Your son's mother.
Yes.
So this is the claim that they make. What happens next?
Well, what happens next is for 11 months, as I said, I was going down to DHS as though I were a drug addict. They had the actual drug addict mother bringing my son to see me.
You've already showed that
I've already shown this.
Yeah.
She's failing the drug test. I'm passing it, but I'm down there in supervised visits. So 11 months go by, and I'm steady pressing.
And that's the basis on which they terminated your parental rights.
They didn't terminate it. They
supervised.
They were seeking
regulated
judiciary to terminate it.
Seeking termination, and in the meantime, supervised.
Supervised. After about 10 months. After about 10 months go by, finally Judge Beam, after we were persistent, said, "Okay, well, go ahead and test Christian Swimp again, my son, for cocaine and marijuana again. Go ahead and test him, because she's so sure for whatever reason he's going to come up, negative, and then they'd have me." He came back positive for cocaine and marijuana.
Which means that the thing that they are processing you for, trying to terminate your rights, the the person responsible for that is the mother.
Absolutely. And the assistant
So
prosecutor.
they then took the baby from the mother and they denied her parental rights on the very same standard that they were applying against you.
Of course not. Are you kidding me?
That's not what happened.
No. Listen, they dropped the case against me. They had no other choice at this point. Then they filed a petition against the mother to remove my son. Surprise, surprise. The same referee, Ariano Heath, the same judge, F.K. Beam, the same guardian ad litem, Tarina Cart, who all collectively were anxious to terminate my parental rights, now said, that's not child abuse and neglect. That's not harmful.
So DHS recommended removal from
Yes.
the woman's home.
Yes.
But the judge and
The
everybody
referee-
else says no problem.
No
leave
problem.
leave him there.
Leave him there. That's not abuse. In
DHS
fact,
did recommend taking the child?
Yes.
Yeah,
DHS,
after the test.
After
that test.
absolute. Jay Polis, assistant prosecutor Jay Polis, was handling the DHS petition to remove my son from the mother at that point. And I'm gonna tell you something. He went hard. I have to commend him. He went hard. He wrote what I felt was an absolutely brilliant brief to remove, and he appealed the decision of the referee to deny it to Judge Beam. And Judge Beam denied the petition, essentially saying, well, that's not child abuse and neglect. But the same Judge Beam
Right, was willing to
allow them to go forward all the way to a jury trial
against you
against me
on the same thing.
on the same thing. This is why, folks, I am saying Judge Beam needs to be removed from the bench. This is why I'm saying that Judge Kelly, Elizabeth Kelly, needs to be removed from the bench, because she took Beam's place in January of 2019, and she's been ruling the same thing. What am I talking about? She's been ruling that
She's been upholding her decision.
upholding Beam's decision that cocaine and marijuana exposure is no emergency. It is nothing to be anxious about, nothing whatsoever. And to add insult to injury, folks, 2 months ago, I filed a motion for full custody. Yet again, trying to get my son out of that situation. This time, it's worse than ever before, because now my son has asthma that's been developed. Now my son has speech delay. Now my son is dealing with physical issues.
How old is your son now?
3. Now I have letters from some of the top pediatric pulmonary specialists in the whole country saying that he's at risk being exposed to these elements. And Judge Kelly still trivialized it and blew it all off. And my son has started coming to me in May of this year telling me that my son's mother's boyfriend was hitting on her. His name is Anthony Strong. They call him Big Ant for nickname. So he kept saying, "Daddy, Big Ant hit mama. Daddy, Big Ant hit mama." This is in May when this began. And I would ask her about it. What's going on? You're lying. He never told you that. Well, in July of this year, July 2nd, she texted me. She's calling me. You're not going to believe what happened. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I call her, what's going on? And I record it because she so many times had told me things and they would turn around and say, she never said it. So she then told me that this man beat her up, came into her house unauthorized, hit her, beat up their 17-year-old child. I had this recorded, folks. I gave that recording to CPS. CPS went over there and she denied it, and they said, okay, we believe you, even though they got it in recording. I put it before the judge in a motion. We have proof, Your Honor, that my son, Christian Swimp, has been exposed to domestic violence in his environment. Judge Kelly said, oh, so she called him for help and he recorded it, huh?
This was the judge's response.
Yes, exactly what she said. And she refused to allow us to play the recording to demonstrate domestic violence in my son's life. And this is
But they based the charge against you,
yeah.
4 months pregnant, in the office for some tension.
Yeah.
We're going to we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Flint's News Talk 1470 WFNT. Unbelievable. We are back. Flint's News Talk 1470 WFNT. Stacy Swimp, I just want to thank you for coming in and sharing your story. And it's amazing. And I think a lot of people, this is exhausting. This is a tremendously difficult battle. It takes someone, I think, special to really wage this fight. And obviously you love your son and he's lucky to have you. How do you come by this? I mean, what's your story? And what's the next step? And we've got just about a minute.
Next step, we keep pressing.
Yeah.
We want to see Judge F.K. Beam removed from the bench. We want to see Judge Elizabeth Kelly removed from the bench. We want to see referee Ariano Heath removed from the bench. We want to see Tarina Cart, who served as the guardian ad litem in this case. We want to see her disciplined. And but more than that, we want to see systemic change, because this can happen anywhere. And I don't believe this is just happening to me. So we need the legislators to codify some kind of new new law, sort of new bill that makes it impossible for judges to rule that it's not imminently harmful or danger or drug exposure. Unfortunately, our current child abuse laws and our current Michigan compiled law is not strong enough on the issue of drug exposure to protect kids sufficiently. So we need to change that. So I've been lobbying hard to the state legislature. And then finally, folks, I just want you to know, I love how they like to peg me as a thug. Because I had a criminal history from 20-something years ago. Mm-hmm. They don't want to pay attention to the fact that since that time, I went to Gordon Conwell Seminary for juvenile justice training. They don't want to pay attention to the fact that for the last 10 years, I've been a nationally recognized leader in juvenile justice, writing laws in Saginaw, Michigan to help people get jobs who've committed criminal offenses. They need a second chance.
Listen,
I've committed my life to that, but they don't care.
We're going to have you back because we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming in. God bless you and more power to you. Keep fighting.
Thank you.
All right.
God bless you.